Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Shift with Elena Agar. In this conversation, I chat with John Neral. We talk a lot about the importance of networking for mid-career job seekers. We also talk about the art of personal branding. We talk about the necessity of storytelling when it comes to job applications. John works a lot with mid-career professionals and helping them kind of reach that next level of their careers. So if you're in that position or just looking to how can you brand yourself a little bit more in the job process, how you can just do something different as you perhaps looking at whether career change or just that next step in your career. I think this episode is definitely for you. Check it out. And as always, hit the like button, share, comment, subscribe. It definitely helps with the reach. I appreciate it and come back. John, welcome to the Shift podcast.
Elena, thank you so much for having me today. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Same, same. I always love to also talk to fellow podcasters. It always makes it a lot of fun. And I love to put people on the spot on the other side because you're usually the one doing this. And now you get to be a guest. How do you feel about that?
No, I appreciate that very much, and I'm looking forward to being on this side of the mic with you. So this will be fun. Yeah,
So we're going to talk a lot about careers and kind of the work that you do with clients. But before we dive into that, give me a little snapshot from our audience, how you got into career coaching and just kind of, why they should stick around for the next 30 to 45 minutes of this conversation.
sure. I had a 25-year career in education, Elena. I started off as a middle school mathematics teacher in northern New Jersey, and my mid-career moment was that I felt like I couldn't do the job anymore. I liked it. I was comfortable, great district, great salary, great kids, all those kind of things, but I wanted something more. And when I made my career pivot in 2011, it was leaving a small district of about 1,700 students and becoming a professional development specialist where I supervised 21 instructional coaches across 13 middle schools for the District of Columbia Public Schools.
Mm.
It was a huge jump professionally, but it was there that I got to hone my instructional coaching skills and my leadership skills in working with people. And that job set me up for the next two after that. And after spending 5 years working as a training and staffing director with an educational nonprofit where I had been doing some informal internal coaching, it was then that I took the leap and I got my coaching certification and launched my coaching practice full time now 8 years ago. And today I get to help mid career professionals find a job they love or love the job they have. And it was the best and biggest shift I could have made.
I love it. I love it. And we're all about shifts on this podcast. I love
All
that.
that shift.
Um,
Absolutely.
so, I'm curious your take on just, there's a lot of talk about taking ownership of your career, or like owning your career and so on. And I think that there's a lot of people out there. I'm sure you get reached out on LinkedIn all the time and even through your networks around people who want to make that career change and who want to do something more. But it's not as straightforward and simple as one might think. So where do people even start on that journey?
I love how you phrase that question because when we think about ownership, I think it's really important for us to take a step back to when we graduate, be it either high school or college. And the mindset that so many of us take is a very passive approach, which is we just want to get a job. We want someone to hire us and give us that first experience. And so we often feel like we're at the mercy of the employer or the organization to really give us that first chance. And then we'll figure out as we get a little bit older what ownership really looks like for our career. But what I often find is that oftentimes when we're about 10 years into our working career, similar to what the definition is for the US Department of Labor and Statistics about what a mid-career professional is, that it's often then we start thinking, maybe I've got a few more choices than I realized. I'm a little more familiar with my strengths and my skill set, my assets and my talents. And I start thinking about what is it that I really want to do? And at that point, that's where we start taking a little bit more of a stronger sense of ownership to say, I want this role. I want this job. I can be of great value with this company, and I'm going to do whatever I need to do in order to get a job within that organization. And if we can learn that lesson even sooner, right? That part about owning your career sets you up for essentially the next 20, 25, 30 years of your career where you absolutely recognize and embrace that you are in more control of where your career is headed rather than just simply expecting or relying on the organization to take good care of you.
Mm. Yeah, I really appreciate that because I read a lot of different reports around kind of just like, satisfaction at work. And the famous one that I'm sure you also keep an eye on is Gallup, right?
Yep.
Like the I forget what is it called exactly. Oh my gosh, it split my mind. But it's it's the employee satisfaction or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. I forget the word, it's slipping me. But anyway, so Gallup releases, or for people who don't know, it releases this annual, basically looking at like fulfillment at work, essentially, like are people engaged in their jobs? And every year it seems like that number is, that 75% of the workforce essentially is just disengaged. And there's a lot of different reasons for it and so on. And I think to your point is because we're not thinking about that ownership earlier on and we get through our careers and the people that are being surveyed is usually within that mid-level, senior level spot, right? And it seems like that number stays the same over and over again. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the other thing I'll add to all of that is so many of us can get caught in this belief that if I go into an organization and I just do good work, right? If I'm grateful for the job and I go in and I do good work, they're gonna pay me and bonus me and promote me accordingly. And we know that doesn't always happen. And
Mhm.
so work's hard, life's hard. And there are things based upon our own individual needs and values that really tap or hit into that overall job satisfaction and what we resonate with and what we don't. And so, in thinking about that, what we want to keep in mind here is if we're going to truly own our career, we have to own what the fit, the function, the finance, and the forward, what I like to call the four F's are. We have to own those four F's to truly recognize that our job happiness and satisfaction is deeply rooted in those four F's: the fit, the function, the finance, the forward.
Mm. I think one of the hardest things for people is to figure out what they want to do, especially for career change seekers. I
Mhm.
think that's a tough question. I think that is an underrated question, is like what I want to do. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. How especially like that fit in particular, 'cause people are like, well, I've been doing this job for a long time. I can't imagine myself doing anything else. And that's where they get stuck. What are do you have any tips for that? Like where to get started?
So, several years ago, and I fully believe this to be a great place to start is we need to think about, what's the work we want to do? Why is that work important? What's your calling? What's your passion? All those kind of things. But that doesn't always resonate with people, especially those who are job seeking and either need to get out of a toxic work situation or they're simply just miserable in their job. So, what I often suggest to people here is where can you help an organization? If we think about that word help, Elena, for a moment, the brain resonates very differently with the word help. Oftentimes, when we hear the word help, our shoulders relax, our defenses go down a little bit. Because if you're going to help me do something, might be interested in learning a little bit more about that. So, when job seekers are thinking about making a career pivot or a shift, what I often ask them to do is really think about where can they help a new organization? Is it with a particular skill set or talent? Is it within their leadership? Are they a strategic visionary or strategic planner that they could really lend their expertise in that regard? But it's all rooted in how you're going to help them because if you have something that a company wants you to help them with, the match lights up. Because the match then is I get to do something I know I'm good at and I want to do, and you need my services to help you.
Mhm. I like that. I never thought of it from that perspective. Like, where can you help? That is very, it takes down the defenses. And
Yeah.
it's much easier to then think about it versus like, well, what do I want to do and all those things. But then it's like, it's much easier, like, where can I help?
Yeah. I had a client recently who was going for an internal promotion, and they were told they were one of three finalists for this internal promotion. They were all internal candidates. And we had a session, and he said to me, what do I need to do? And I said, I'm going to offer you to do two things. One, listen intuitively and diagnostically in the interview. Listen to what their pain points are, their problems. And secondly, make an offer to help them. Communicate very clearly and cleanly. Here's how I'm going to help you do point A, point B, point C. Called me up the end of the week. He says to me, John, I got the job. I said, oh, that's great. Congratulations. Is this something you want? Are you going to take it? We worked through all those things. And he said, here was the biggest takeaway. He said, in the feedback I got from the interview, I was told that out of all three candidates, I was the only one who communicated how I was going to help them. The other
Mm-hmm.
two made it all about themselves. They said, and they really felt like they could work with me on this, and that it was more of a partnership rather than a, hey, I just want this promotion and I'm deserving of it.
Mm.
So I share that with everybody today. If you're thinking about making a shift, really lean into where can you help? You may find some answers in that to help you make that shift.
Beautiful. I like that. Another kind of, I guess, anxiety a lot of people feel these days around their careers is just this ability to stay relevant or even, understand how to keep up with the ever-changing job market with AI and everything that's coming out. There's just like there's so much in the news and you don't know what you should believe and what you shouldn't believe. But let's say you do believe that stuff and you're worried about being, maintaining your relevance. What do you do about that? How do you stay relevant in a workforce today?
Well, just the way you asked that question, what I would offer everybody initially is we got to acknowledge things are changing, right? We saw so much change in 2024 around AI. Imagine what we're going to see heading through 2025, the changes that are going to be in AI. So the tech in the world is moving far faster than what we've ever imagined. And to your point, what it means about staying relevant is be informed, right? Make sure you are reading information that is current and trustworthy. But additionally, make sure you're having conversations both at work and within your network, be it within your organization and outside of your organization, about what other people are seeing. Let's not lose sight of the fact that the conversations we have with our peers and our colleagues are oftentimes great ways for us to gather information and process that information that we can take back to demonstrate our relevance in the workplace. So if we're just doing those two things, if we're staying informed and we're having conversations, that is an absolutely great way to stay relevant in this current marketplace.
Yeah, I think it also helps with just maintaining that confidence, I think, throughout just even, whether you're searching for work or we're just kind of just staying in a job and wanting to continue to network and learn. Because one of the biggest hits that people take through career change or job search is the hit to confidence
Yeah.
because it is so hard to keep hearing a no when you feel like you bring something to the table and the application process is so complicated and there's hundreds of people applying to certain things. But then, how do you even maintain that confidence? Like, what are some people, how to not take it personal, I guess. What are your thoughts on that?
So so whenever I hear confidence, I often equate it with competence. Right. And so just to differentiate for a minute, right? I can be confident that I could change a tire on my car. I've done it before. It's not something I do on a regular basis. But my competence is that I know where to get the information. I know how to take that information and apply it. And so, yes, confidence is needed and necessary and important. I do think we have to be careful that we don't come across as being overconfident where it might be perceived as being cocky or arrogant. throughout my career, I've had an opportunity to be in rooms with extremely amazingly talented individuals who were working on some very high level projects within the education industry. And one of the things I would hear them say time and time again is, it's okay to struggle. It's okay to struggle with this. I don't know everything, but I know that we're going to be able to figure this out, or I know that eventually we'll be able to figure that out. It's very similar in a lot of ways when I'm working with clients who are trying to find a new job, especially if they're making a career pivot. And they'll say things to me like, well, John, I'm really confident. I'm a great team player. I'm a great communicator. I'm dependable. Nobody cares about that because that's expected,
Hmm.
right? That's expected. But what I want to know is like, if you're really good at Excel, where are you an Excel ninja? Like, where are you super confident in using Excel that a company would want that particular skill? Or if it's about developing and implementing strategy, what is it that you've done that you have the confidence to communicate that you're the best person for the job given a particular problem or challenge they have in front of them? Confidence is never a bad thing. But confidence needs to be backed up with evidence, and that evidence is based on how you tell that story.
Yeah. I think that's another hard part for people is being able to tell that story,
Mhm.
and that part of it is a lot about that being able to brand yourself. And I think that's another thing that, at least what I hear from clients is being able to tell your story in a way that makes sense, being confident about that story and having facts to back it up, results to back it up. And this is where branding is very important. And I'm a fan of personal branding, but a lot of people are not. And I think because it's seen as this like, well, you're just showing off type thing. That's what it feels like. It doesn't feel very genuine to a lot of people, and I totally get it. But what are your thoughts when it comes to job search or career change or just career growth in general and personal branding? Do we do it? Do we not do it?
Oh, I absolutely think we have to do it. I couldn't agree with you more in that regard. And, somebody's thoughts about what their personal brand are is a great opportunity for us to dig in and get curious. But when clients come to me and I talk with them and coach them around their brand, I always go back to Jeff Bezos's quote about it. Jeff Bezos says that your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. Right. So all of us have a brand. People are talking about us behind our backs, right? They're making judgments, they're figuring things. What we want to make sure is that our brand closely, if not exactly, aligns with our reputation. And when the brand aligns with the reputation, that's where the story and the evidence gets much easier to tell because that's where the magic happens. We go in for an interview, it's all about branding. It's all about branding in terms of how you're answering questions and, giving examples of things. And so oftentimes job seekers play it way too safe in an interview. And as interviews are getting shorter and the time frame for interviews are getting longer, if your brand isn't capturing the interest of the hiring manager in the interview panel, you will not get the job. You just won't, right? You've
Mm.
got to find a way to make yourself stand out, and your brand is absolutely one way you do that.
Mm. When you work with people, do you see that having that brand and reputation is like the one that the differentiating factor for them, or like percentage wise, I guess if you could guess, like make a guess around how many jobs that the people you work with have gotten via that reputation, the network, the people that they know versus like applying online.
Especially for mid-career professionals, their chances of getting a job through networking are far greater. In fact, the last study I read, which I think was by HubSpot or Hootsuite, I can't remember which one, but it was around 70% of mid-career jobs are often found and secured through networking.
Mm.
Well, networking is all about building relationships. Those relationships are built on your brand and your reputation, right? Having somebody advocate for you to their company or to a colleague is absolutely potentially going to save them a ton of time in the whole hiring process because, oh, you know somebody and they're talented and they're really good. Yeah, let me go ahead and interview them because if they're a great fit and we agree this is a great match, we can get them to work sooner rather than later. And for me and my team or my company or whatever, that just saves me a ton of time. Right. So those business relationships and conversations are absolutely grounded in that alignment between a brand and a reputation.
Mm. I think
Yeah.
also, so I do quite a bit of recruitment, and from a recruitment perspective, one thing that my recruiters go to is the first is like, who do we know?
Yeah.
Who do we know that knows somebody? Which, do we have an internal referral we can go for? Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's, and it's kind of sad in a way because at the same time, there's so many tools out there to make your job search easier. But
Mhm.
it's like, and so many people are making money off of it, but ultimately it's making the job market worse, in my opinion, especially when I look through like LinkedIn recruiters and all the different tools that are out there to like automate the job search. Because what it does is it increases the amount of people that are applying to a particular job, which makes it impossible for a recruiter or hiring manager or whoever's screening those resumes to go through all of them. So then the people who might be great talent, they get lost in the thousands of people that have applied for that position. And the people that end up getting the opportunity to interview are the people who have the brand, the reputation, and the network to
I
actually,
agree.
it's crazy.
Absolutely. And the other thing I want to offer everybody today too, especially as you're exploring that shift, is when you think about your brand, you think about the story you are telling, the cleaner and clearer you can tell that story, the easier it becomes for the recruiter or the hiring manager to assess fit. So, for example, if you're going for a senior manager or director type role, and you're talking about your leadership style, and you say, "Oh, I'm a great communicator, and my door's always open," you've got to back that up with some type of example and evidence to help them understand the colorful picture you're trying to paint rather than relying on you just believe they're going to know what you're talking about. It's one of those things in the interview piece that I coach on as well. I talk about it in terms of how we build the relationship, right? We build the relationship by giving them as many components to the story as we can as quickly as possible. I remember I was hiring for a job and somebody came in and they said, "Oh, you should hire me because I'm a team player." And I looked at them and I said, "Well, how do you play on a team?" And they challenged me and they said, "Oh, you don't know how to play on a team?" I said, "Oh, I know how to play on a team. I want to make sure you know how to play on a team the way we play here. So I look forward to your answer." And they were like, well, but they had to define it. You can't just throw the buzzword out there and
Yeah.
expect that everybody's going to know what you mean.
Yeah, it's just like to go back to your point, like it's being able to tell a story.
Hmm?
To tell a story. No, that's beautiful. Um, I have a confession to make. I was actually just reflecting on this over the last couple of days, and I was chatting with a friend of mine earlier and sharing this with her. I absolutely love what I do in my work and talent development and so on. But I've spent 2 weeks, I was away, and one of those weeks I spent in Bali, and Bali being the that relaxing and magical place that people say it is, it truly is. And one of the things I came back with is that I'm doing too much. And as much as I love everything that I'm doing, it's too much.
Yeah.
And in the world of career coaching that you and I are both in, it's also we give a lot of energy, and that's, it's I think it's a lot of energy given out, and that's beautiful, and that's what we do, and that's what we're there's support and guide. But at the same time, it can be very exhausting. And that's the conclusion I came to is I'm like, maybe I need to do a little bit less next year, like in a strategic way, right? Like not sitting around tumbling my thumbs, but just doing a little bit less because that balance is, I don't even want to say balance. I don't think it's balance. I think I don't believe in balance. I believe in maybe priorities or some sort of a sync in the work life that you're doing, some kind of system that works for you as an individual. So for you, you've been in this business for 8 years. Coaching is a beautiful thing, it's working with people, but it is draining, whether even if you love it. So how do you find that balance, or whatever word you want to use for it?
Well, a little over a year ago, unexpectedly, my retina detached.
Hmm.
And in the scope of less than 24 hours, I had this shadow in my eye. I had seen three doctors, and the next thing I knew, the third doctor was sticking two needles in my eye to put a gas bubble in it to help reattach the retina. And while that temporarily worked, temporarily meaning it didn't, it ended up then a week later, I'm now in the hospital having surgery.
Mm.
And I remember sitting in the chair and being like, okay, I'm thankful I'm going to be able to see everything's going to be okay and stuff like that. And similar to you, like I had this epiphany where I was like, something has to change. Right. And I was gratefully blessed at the time that my caseload, my client load was at 125% of what I wanted because I couldn't say no. And my ability to not say no is what I firmly believe got me sick and stressed me out. And the body has an amazing way of handling things. And I thought, okay, the the priority needs to be I need to put myself first. When I put myself first, I'm better able to be there for my clients. And so the whole 2024 was an opportunity for me to evaluate my systems and processes, my work streams, my workflows, and go, okay, how can I serve people as best as I know I can, but at the same time still take care of myself first so I don't get sick again. This doesn't happen. And so there were some shifts. I took some things off my plate. I said no to a couple of projects and things that I didn't feel were a great fit or a great match or a best interest. And having that agency to look at this from the perspective of when I take better care of myself, I can serve more has been extremely helpful. And heading into 2025 and starting this year off, I'm excited for what's to come.
Yeah, that's beautiful. What are some thoughts for 2025 if you can share? What are some things you're excited about and looking forward? Maybe some things you're going to say no to, let go of. I don't know.
Yeah. So I definitely want to start building some more corporate partnerships, be it in terms of either public speaking, workshops, meeting facilitations. I did some projects in 2024 that were really exciting, and I'm looking forward to continuing those and picking up some new ones. But the other thing that I'm really excited about, and hopefully by the time this episode launches, this will be launched as well, is not every mid-career professional can pay for one-on-one coaching. And so while I love working with people one-on-one, and that will always continue to be a part of my business for the foreseeable future, because I just love those types of relationships, it is about building a community and
Mhm.
bringing mid-career professionals together in a container, in a group that allows them to get the support that they need, whether it be for finding a new job, excuse me, or building their leadership and executive presence, growing in the company to make the impact that they want. And so being able to have that mid-career community is something it's in the works and almost launched to develop in 2025. So I'm excited about helping even more people than I've ever done in my business.
That's amazing. And do share that with us and maybe come back to us. Hopefully we should do another episode in the coming quarter, maybe two or three, and talk about the community. That'll be awesome.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you.
The last question I ask all of my guests is, what is one thing you wish people would ask themselves more often?
Oh, I I wrote about this in my first book, and it's something my husband always says. And he'll always say, we lie to ourselves first,
Hmm.
right? When we think about, well, why haven't I lost weight? Well, that pint of ice cream didn't have any calories. We lie to ourselves first. Why does my back hurt? Well, I didn't stretch. Okay, well, why didn't you? We lie to ourselves first. So, Elena, the question I would want to ask people today is, where are you lying to yourself?
Mhm.
Where are you not being truthful, be it about your job satisfaction, your career path, your relationships, your career trajectory, whatever that might be, to really be honest with yourself. And you don't have to share it with anybody, but have that honest and intentional conversation with yourself about where am I lying to myself? And then ask yourself how much worth it is, or rather, how much is it worth it for me to continue lying to myself? That
Mm.
would be the question I'd want people to be asking themselves.
That's a first. I've never had anybody come up with that question. That's a scary but super effective question, I think, for people to ask themselves. But you know what's interesting is that, at least in my experience, like when I was, I feel like as a coach myself, I don't know if you feel the same way, but when you coach other people, you kind of also coach yourself throughout the process, not realizing it. So it's kind of this like self-reflective, continuous like journey. And in my 30s, I'm still in my 30s, but in my early 30s, I remember that was one of the toughest things I had to face is like, where am I my own worst enemy? And like, where am I feeding this BS? Like the stories that I'm telling myself essentially. And that was the hardest thing to break through because then you have to face yourself and you're like, oh crap. Like you have to look yourself in the mirror and your whole world crumbles sometimes because then you have to reassess everything around you and realize that you're here because you got yourself here in most cases. Like it's not anybody else. And I think that's a scary thought for a lot of people. I think it's the hardest, and especially the older you get, the harder it becomes. So that's the assumption I'm making at least. What are your thoughts?
No, yeah, I agree with you on that, and I'll share a little secret with you. So I've always been a voracious note taker. Like going through school, like I learned to take notes in an outline format, right? So my high school teachers, my college professors, everybody wanted my notes. My notes were phenomenal, right? But in order to stay focused and stay on track with that, I only write on the right side of the page. So if I have a notebook that's open, I'll only write on the right side of the page
Yeah.
because the left side of the page, that's where I parking lot things for me. So if stuff comes up, I will like quickly jot down a word or two. And then when I have time to go back, right? So if you and I were having a meeting, right, and something popped into my brain, like, oh, I should be thinking about that, I will jot it down on the left side of the page. And when that meeting's over, I'll go back. That's where I'll self coach. That's where I'll think. That's where I'll reflect. I'll journal about and everything. Because to your point, stuff does come up. I've got to be fully present for my client, but that doesn't mean my brain or my heart may not be open to some things. I just have to parking lot it until it's a better time for me to deal with it.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. The parking lot. Parking lot of thought. I never
Yeah.
do that, but I should. That's interesting.
It was the
Um,
only way I could is the only way I could stay focused in a college lecture because my mind would wander,
yeah.
and I would just have to put that off on the side and I'd be like, okay, I can go back to that later. Yeah.
Yeah, so
It
you
just
don't forget as well. Yeah, if I don't write things down, nothing happens. I don't know what it is, but it's yeah, to your point, like if I don't write things down, either I'm gonna keep thinking about it or it doesn't happen. And usually what happens is I'll just forget about it and it doesn't happen.
yeah,
Like for
absolutely.
the
I'm the
thoughts,
same way. I've got the
Yeah.
most obnoxious to-do list and I clean it every month.
You and I both. But as I mentioned, my 2025 is doing less. I think that's my theme. That's
Yep.
my thing. I think is just doing less. I'm known as a doer, and I actually made a post that I said I don't want to be a doer anymore. Like I have this kind of brand as a doer. Like that's what like when I asked them, I'm like, you just do, like you just get things done, which is great. But I get a lot of things done that just don't align with my season in my life right now. It
Yeah.
feels like,
Yeah.
it's time to
And
change
how
seasons.
wonderful to have that awareness and thought that that's where you need to be right now.
Yeah, well, I had to spend a lot of money and go all the way to Southeast Asia to have that thought. I had to go to, well, to the point, we're so caught up and we're working all the time that unless you separate yourself completely and
Oh,
actually
yeah.
move yourself out of that environment, and I'm not great at like being able to just meditate and like come up with stuff during, like I have to exit the place that I'm at. I've never been good at like staycations. And I think that's, if anybody's listening, that's helpful. Maybe you just need to leave where you are for just a little while. You don't have to go all the way to Bali, but you can like even something nearby. Because I think that's what's powerful is removing yourself from that environment because we get so caught up, especially, if you love what you do and you're just doing things all the time, you don't have time to breathe or think.
No.
Yeah.
I'm a huge advocate of that as well. Like I often find sometimes a hotel room with some room service, or even just going to a local supermarket and bringing food back into the room and having a
Hmm.
quiet night and a quiet few hours to get some stuff done can be extremely helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you, chat with you, learn about the community that you're building?
Yeah, so there's two places that are the easiest. So one is for people to connect with me on LinkedIn. Certainly welcome for people to reach out, mention that you heard our conversation today here on the podcast. You can find me at John John Neral Neral. So find me on LinkedIn. You can also find me on my website, which is johnneral.com. And there you can take a look at all of my free resources, my digital courses and products, and also check in with my podcast called the Mid-Career GPS, which you and I are going to have a conversation with very soon as well. So look forward
Yeah,
to that.
give us a little 30-second intro to your podcast. Who is it for? What do you talk about? Why should people listen?
Yeah, podcast is typically for mid-level, mid-career professionals, typically between the ages of 35 and 50, who hold titles between manager and senior director, and they do not want to be stuck. So if you're unhappy in your career, you're looking to level up within your organization, or you're looking to lead more effectively and impactfully, the Mid-Career GPS will help you prepare, position, and promote so you can show up to find the job you love or love the job you have.
Beautiful. And we're going to have a chat on it, so make sure you guys check it
We
out.
are,
I'll
yes, I
include
look
that
forward
in
to
the
it.
show notes as well. John, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Elena, as always, thank you so much for the work you do.